Hey, welcome to the second channel. This is a follow-up video to my main video on public shaming, so please, if you haven't watched that, go watch it, linked below. This is going to be a public shaming survival guide because while I think we should stop public shaming unless something majorly changes with the reward structures that we have on social media, I think we will continue to publicly shame. So I wanted to put together a guide for if you are publicly shamed, maybe how to get out of it, because while the level of outrage is pretty similar across scandals, how people actually come out of it is totally different. You have people like Pewdiepie who seem to emerge unscathed from their scandal, and you also have people like Logan Paul who their career is largely tanked from their scandal, or at least seriously damaged, and everything they do after that is judged by that scandal. So the first thing to understand if you've been publicly shamed is that you do need to apologize or somehow clear up the controversy surrounding your name, but you need to do it in the right way. Now, making an apology is good, but as most people know who've seen people make public apologies after a controversy is a lot of times they don't work, and they don't work for very specific reasons that we're gonna go over. The first reason is that anytime you apologize to a group, your forgiveness is going to be fragmented unless there's a representative for that group who kind of speaks for everyone. And normally that doesn't exist online, right? You always have somebody saying, I don't accept his apology, and you have some people saying, I do accept his apology. So what you need to do is prop up someone who's sort of the prototypical offended person. So to give you an example, you have Bill Maher, who says the N-word on his show, and he gets in all sorts of trouble. Here's the clip.
Work in the field.
That's part of that. That's
Senator. I'm a house. No, it's...
Torrent of criticism was unleashed at the comedian whose brand is being politically acerbic and outrageous. DeRay McKesson, a Black Lives Matter activist, tweeting, Bill Maher has got to go. There's no explanations that make this acceptable.
So what does he do? You've just said this thing on your show that you're not allowed to say. You have Ice Cube on, who is from NWA, and he's the guy. If you had to pick a guy that represents the voice of everybody, all the offended people, he's the guy. And he goes on his show and he sort of chastises him. He says, you know, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. But at the end, he says this.
It was wrong, and I apologized. And, you know, more than that I can't do.
I accept your apology.
When he actually forgives Bill Maher, it's sort of like he's forgiving for everybody else too. He's saying, we've moved on from this. You know, we're done with this.
I made it, I'm done, and we can laugh now. We can tell jokes.
Okay.
And this is the part of public apologies that you can create that one-on-one apology forgiveness relationship rather than just appealing to, you know, just anybody on Twitter. This is a great way to do it. But it can backfire because if you don't get the right representative for the offended group, your controversy can continue. So if you look at Kevin Hart, he tries to go on Ellen after some homophobic tweets get surfaced.
I don't want to have this conversation anymore because I know who I am. I'm not that guy.
I know you're not that guy, because I know you, and you should host the Oscars, and I'm going to talk you into it after this.
Great idea, right? Because she's gay. Wrong. Because there's a better representative for the offended that Kevin Hart didn't apologize to, Don Lemon, I really don't know how to say that. After he apologizes to Ellen, or sort of tries to move past the controversy, and Ellen sort of forgives him or whatever and says, I believe in Kevin Hart, I believe in giving him second chances. What does Don Lemon say? Don Lemon say, he says,
honestly, Ellen doesn't speak for the whole community.
And the reason he can say that, and it actually works, is because he is a better representative.
I'm a gay man. I don't know what it's like to be, I'm a gay black man. I don't know what it's like to be a white lesbian. I don't know. So I feel obligated to speak out on this issues.
I think Kevin Hart's tweets were very clearly directed at black men. So the controversy continues, and Kevin Hart has to continue this apology tour. So if you do not have the right representative of the offended, you're gonna kind of eat it. You gotta get the right representative of the offended. But that's a really powerful way, probably the most powerful way I've ever seen to get past a public scandal, is to find someone who represents the offended to get on your side and sort of theatrically represent everyone else. So secondly, there's the apology itself. There's a lot of reasons not to apologize, as I've mentioned in my video, which I will link right here on non-apologies. You know, if it's unfounded outrage, if it's sort of built on BS, then actually apologizing can lend credence to the very scandal itself, and it sort of cements the scandal as a scandal. So there's reasons not to apologize, but there are also reasons to apologize if there's founded outrage. So if you do decide to do that, don't do a half-hearted apology. There's so many half-hearted apologies that continue scandals well past their due date. They could have moved on, but instead they kind of give this flimsy apology that's not really an apology. So if you want to know how to give a pitch-perfect apology, check out Nick Smith's Categorical Apology. I will link it down below. He goes over how to give the perfect apology that will satisfy everyone. It's a great read to understand the anatomy of an apology, so I would recommend you go read it. Finally, an apology will only work if you are transparently sincere. And this can be really hard to prove. Unlike a traditional apology, where there's only really one reason to apologize, guilt, there's many reasons to make a public apology for, you know, your brand, for your reputation, for a job you may have lost because of your scandal. There's a lot of competing reasons for why you'd maybe fake an apology. And as the audience, we don't want to be tricked. We don't want to be lied to. And we sort of are very skeptical of anyone who gives a public apology if there might be some ulterior motives there. And the problem is if you haven't built the right rapport with your audience and you aren't seen as sort of a transparent, trustworthy guy, you can't really build that trust in the middle of your scandal. So if you don't have it, you're not going to be able to pull this off. You can see this with Logan Paul, where he messes up and he delivers what is essentially a categorical apology. You know, Nick Smith would approve of this apology. He takes full blame. He promises to be better. He, you know, names the people who are harmed. There's all these great things about his apology, but ultimately it falls on totally deaf ears. Why? Because his entire catalog of videos is him doing anything for views. So when he all of a sudden seems to be super sincere and sensitive, nobody believes him. You can see this with the Casey Neistat interview, where Casey cannot get past this idea that Logan Paul might just be faking it all and trying to dupe Casey into sort of set up a redemption arc for him, and he's not having any of it.
My very specific intention with this interview was to see if he was sincere, or if the whole thing's just a charade for good PR. I don't know. Is this a fluff piece to make people feel better about Logan Paul?
No.
Like a bullshit video that's just like, look, you should feel bad.
It's an unbiased, objective story.
Maybe I'm being cynical, but there's a little whiff of it sounding like you see yourself in some capacity as a victim.
No.
Logan Paul ends up just like kind of spinning his wheels, trying to prove something that can't be proved once you're already in a scandal, which is your honesty. So that's really hard, but you can see the opposite of that with someone like Pewdiepie, who delivers what is essentially a very similar pitched apology. It, you know, takes responsibility for his actions, shows regret, all this kind of stuff that Logan Paul did as well. But ultimately, everyone forgives Pewdiepie. Why? Because he's built up the right rapport with his audience to where people don't feel duped and people feel like he probably means what he's saying. So this is a really important part of surviving a public shaming and a public scandal that is sort of out of your control once it's already happened. So you should think about building the right rapport with people to be trustworthy before the scandal breaks out, so when it does, you can have a better shot of surviving. So to recap, you need a representative of the offended so your forgiveness isn't fragmented. This is the best way to get out of a public scandal. You also need to give a categorical apology if that's warranted. Otherwise, you need to give a non-apology, and I have a video on that. Thirdly, you need transparent sincerity. People need to believe you and believe that you don't have ulterior motives. This is one thing you're gonna have to prepare beforehand. You can't do it once you're in the middle of a scandal. With those three things, if you do them right, you will survive your public shaming. You will get through it. So those are the big three. There are a few side ideas I want to discuss, but that's the major things. A few side things might be, though, What you have to realize when you're publicly shamed is that there are two competing narratives going on. There's the one you're trying to say, that you're a good person and all these things, and there's this second thing that's going on Twitter, which is the worst caricature of you as possible. That's a second narrative that's happening. And your job, when you're being publicly shamed, is to stand strong on this first one or create a third narrative. You can see Logan Paul trying to do this with what he's doing with now he's the suicide help guy. Now he's the guy who's always watching out for mental health. That's a third narrative he's built because he knows his first narrative of just being like this fun, goofy guy won't survive this second narrative of him being a heartless, a guy who makes fun of suicide victims. So what does he do? He builds this third narrative, like I'm helping out, I'm a changed man, etc., etc., etc. So it's all about controlling your own narrative. That's one thing. Secondly, if you're not that famous, maybe you don't have all the resources to get a hold of these people. You can't get a famous representative of the offended. Maybe you don't have the right rapport with people. So a few ideas there. Number one, you're in luck because you're in less trouble. News stories don't get clicks if you're not famous. So it's unlikely your controversy will continue for very long. But if it does, here are a few ideas. Number one, reach out to journalists. People love a comeback story or a story of somebody who's been misjudged. So that's really helped a lot of people. People like Justine Sacco have been helped by journalists like John Ronson, who wrote a book on her and basically saved her career. She was fired because of her shaming, and now she's rehired because of this redemption arc that was written about her. Secondly, get a reputation fixer on Google. I'll leave a link below to one reputation fixer. I can't vouch for them personally, but they're the first thing that comes up. I'm just giving kind of like a case study that there are these people out there. They will help your scandals go to the bottom results of Google. One of the big problems with why scandals continue on forever is because Google keeps serving the scandal up over and over and over, even 2 years after it's done. So those are a few ideas on how to survive a public shaming, even if you're not famous, because it does happen to regular people. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching the second video. I'm trying to do this thing where when I have leftovers from a video, because I do so much research on these topics that things have to get cut, I want to kind of put them in a second video on the second channel. So those of you who are interested in sort of a part 2 or the kind of scraps of what may have been cut from the main video can still get it here. It won't be as well edited, but at least you'll know about it and you'll learn. So thank you. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and I hope you have a wonderful day.